before we start the message over the house rules. Just a reminder, number one, we go all in during the message. If you want to take notes, there are pens and note cards in the back. If you want to go grab those, you can go up right now. Nobody's going to notice. You'll be fine. Yep, go grab one right now. We also stay off our phones, so phones stay in the pocket, please. Make sure they're muted. If you're not sure, you probably should check it right now. Make sure your phone doesn't ring during the message, because then everybody will look at you. Number two, we stay away from PDA. Keep your hands to yourself, just like at school. Number three, we don't leave the room during service, and so you guys need to stay in here in the room until we dismiss tonight. You're not little kids anymore, you can hold it, it's okay. And number four, we have fun in church. We did make a couple updates. Avery told you guys last week, we have a new rule because of fire code about not moving chairs around. You guys did a great job at that. I didn't see one student move a chair. We didn't even say that this week. Good job, good job. And then also make sure you guys are exiting through that door, not through that door tonight. All right, cool. 2 weeks ago, we kicked off our current series, Mine. The bottom line was strong faith is about doing, not just knowing. And last week, our bottom line was, if you want a faith of your own, you can't build it alone, which was all about small groups in a community, which was leading into Winter Retreat. How many of you guys went to Winter Retreat this past weekend? Yeah, you guys had an awesome time? Yeah. I was kind of amazed how much you guys loved it. We always take a poll after camps and retreats to get some feedback from you guys, especially with new locations. And your average rating score of all the students was 9 out of 10. And that kind of blew me away a little bit. So clearly you guys loved it. And hopefully you remember what Brian, the guest speaker, talked about and what we talked about in our small groups, that you can apply what you learned in your life. You don't just leave it like we talked about on Sunday at the mountaintop, but you keep that experience and what God did in your heart this past weekend going. So awesome, awesome, awesome. It was a fun weekend for sure. So the past couple of weeks in this series, we've been talking about how God grows our faith and takes from something our parents believed and transforms it into something to become a unique part of who we are, not our parents anymore. It's becoming who we are. We're taking our parents' faith and making it my faith, mine. And really what we're looking at is how someone in middle and high school develops a faith of their own. I don't know about you, but I've noticed when people talk about their faith journeys, they often point back to a time when they were involved to take part in some type of ministry, program, or service. Whether it was a mission trip, a serve project, or a place where they could volunteer, an opportunity to volunteer on a regular basis. They frequently point to a time when they got involved in something bigger than themselves, and that proved to be a change moment in their life when their faith started exploding on fire. What's interesting is that they almost talk about the hesitations or excuses that they made at the time on why they couldn't do that particular serve project or volunteer opportunity or mission trip. Things that made them want to say no. Things like, I didn't feel qualified to do that, or I didn't have the time, or I didn't see any way that I could make a difference. The problem seemed too big. What difference could little old me make? But for some reason, the people that I've heard, they talk about how they moved past that and accepted the opportunity, regardless of the excuses that popped in their mind. And as a result, it didn't just affect the lives of other people who they served, it ended up affecting their own life. Their life changed as a result of serving other people. See, I believe this on the screen right here. Go ahead, next one. This principle right here is, there it is. There's a direct connection between growing our faith and our involvement in serving others. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight in week 3 of Mine. But when it comes to getting involved in serving other people, if we're really honest with ourselves, there's a lot of times this tug-of-war that's going on inside us. It's a war in your heart and mind for that decision of, should I really take time out of my busy schedule to go help someone else? I don't know. Maybe you feel like God is calling you to jump in and contribute somewhere, but you're also struggling to make that commitment to serve. After all, Sunday is your only day to sleep in. So do I really want to wake up early on Sunday and go serve in the nursery here at church? I don't know. That seems out of the question, right? Some of your favorite TV shows are on Monday night. So that prevents me from serving at the assisted living community down the street. It just won't work. Or you already have so much going on with sports, homework, family, friends, and other extracurricular stuff that squeezing in one more thing seems impossible. Even if we know that opportunity is for a really good cause. Most important thing to keep in mind when it comes to this kind of decision is that this isn't just about the needs of the people you're serving or helping. Because honestly, there's a good chance that they will survive without you. So if they don't really need me, let alone me, to help them, so why do people serve? Why does God encourage us to serve in the Bible, serve others? Well, the bigger issue is that you may be missing out on something God has in mind for you by choosing not to be involved in that opportunity to serve others. In fact, check this out. God might be using this service opportunity to move you toward a more real and personal relationship with Him. Why is it that so many youth ministries around our country do serve projects? We're certainly not the only youth ministry that does quarterly serve projects. Why do so many youth ministries go on mission trips? It's not just for the experience or the memories, no. It's because there's statistics and research that shows that when a student ministry goes and serves in places like Mexico or in Africa, that man, they just absolutely change the culture. That whole community has changed forever. Sometimes that might happen, but most of the time, no. The primary reason most youth pastors take their students to serve is because of the life change that happens in the students. It's not so much about the people we're serving, but what happens inside your own heart. You open your heart and allow God to use you to serve others. Now, fortunately, the Bible has a lot to say about this. And what we're going to look at tonight can be a game changer for you when it comes to developing a faith that you call mine. Tonight we're going to look at a couple different famous Bible stories. There's a lot of scripture tonight. I hope you guys are okay with that. Usually we only give one Bible story. Tonight we're giving two. And so, starting out, there's a great account recorded by a guy named Matthew, who was a follower, a disciple of Jesus, whose documentation of Jesus' life was eventually included in the Bible. Does anybody have a guess what his book is called in the Bible?
Mark.
Matthew.
It's not Mark. It actually is Matthew. Yeah, you guys are sharp. That's right. It's Matthew. That's right. All right, we're going to pick up in Matthew chapter 14. You can follow on the screen. When Jesus heard what had happened... go back. When Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Well, we need to know the context here. Why was Jesus withdrawing in private? What happened? Well, if we look at the context, the verses before this, we know that Jesus had a famous cousin. Does anybody know what his name was? John the Baptist. That's right, John the Baptist. And what we know is that John the Baptist had a serious run-in with a Jewish religious leader named Herod Antipas, who was kind of controlled the middle part of modern-day Israel, north of Jerusalem. And what happened was that Herod Antipas had taken his sister-in-law, so his brother's wife, his brother had passed away, he took his sister-in-law, and who was also his niece, to become his wife. Gross, right? Yeah, nasty guy. Let me tell you a little about Herod Antipas. Nasty dude. And long story short, what happened is that John the Baptist criticized that and said how immoral that was to take your brother's wife as your own wife. He said that's not cool what you did, Herod Antipas, and so he publicly criticized him. Well, that's a dangerous thing to do to somebody who has a lot of political power. And eventually it got John thrown in prison, and then through a really crazy story, it led Herod Antipas to order John the Baptist's execution. He was beheaded, cut his head off. Obviously Jesus loved his cousin John the Baptist. So he's upset, he's sad. That's what he had heard, and that's why he withdrew privately. He wanted to be alone. Does anybody else like being alone when something bad happens and you get bad news? Yeah, so you guys can understand, you can relate to what Jesus is feeling. Remember, Jesus was fully human. He's fully God, but he was also fully human. So he had all the emotions that you and I have. He's upset. He loved his cousin John, and he was grieving. So Jesus wanted some space and time to get away. The story continues. Hearing of this, so hearing that Jesus withdrew, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. So Jesus is trying to get away by himself. What's happening? People are following him, not letting him get away. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. So he wasn't angry like, can you people just leave me alone? I don't know if you heard, but my cousin was just brutally executed. Just leave me alone. No. What did Jesus do? He had compassion on these people. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, this is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food. Now the disciples are hungry, the crowd is hungry, and they're in the middle of nowhere. And so it's time to eat. So the disciples are saying, hey Jesus, let's go give them a dinner break. Let them go out, get a meal, and come back later. But Jesus did something interesting here. Check it out. Jesus replied, they do not need to go away. You give them something to eat. Just so you know, there's 5,000 men alone in addition to women and children here. He's telling his disciples, you feed them. What? Jesus basically says, you know what? You're right, disciples. Everyone, including me, is getting really hungry. Why don't you come up with some way to feed all of us? Maybe you felt like God was giving you this type of impossible challenge before. It's that feeling you get when you sense that someone has a need and something in you takes notice. You feel compassion, empathy, like Jesus did. Your heart goes out to that group or that person. And as you're sensing that need, you feel something within you. It's called a nudge. It's almost like you hear God saying, you're right. They do have a need. You should meet it. The problem is that most of the time, instead of responding to the nudge ourselves, we'll say, nah, I'll just pray that the right other person, somebody else, comes and meets these people's needs. Just not me, because I don't have what it takes. I don't have the skills, God. I don't have the time. Well, the disciples were no different. They did the same thing. Check out their reply here. We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. In other words, hey, Jesus, we're not prepared or equipped to meet the needs of all these people. You've got the wrong guys. But Jesus replies with this. All right, bring them here to me, he said. Now, Jesus is referring to the existing loaves and fish. What Jesus says to his disciples is the same thing he says to us. Bring me what you have right now. I'll use it, whatever you got right now. But what do we typically answer back when we feel that nudge from God? We might say things like this. But Lord, I don't have enough time. And God tells us to bring him what we have. God, I don't have enough talent. He tells us to bring him what we have. But what if they ask me hard questions? I just don't know enough about the Bible. I don't have enough experience, patience. Just bring him what you have. So that's what the disciples did. Check it out. And he directed the people to sit down on the grass, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to the disciples. Imagine being there. Jesus is sitting here with this small portion of food that would maybe could feed 1 person or 2 people, 1 or 2 people. Hands it to you. He says, go around and give it to those 5,000 people. What? How is this going to work? So what do you do? Well, the disciples obeyed. They turned around and started handing it out to the people in need. In other words, once Jesus handed them the bread and the fish, they did what they knew how to do. Serve people. You see, that's all they could do. They didn't know how to feed 5,000 people with a couple fish and loaves of bread. So they started with what they knew. They knew how to turn around and hand needy people what they had with them, what was in their possession. They could do that. The Bible sums it up pretty simply. Check it out. Disciples gave them to the people. They just kept handing them out. And handing them out. And where's this coming from? What in the world? And it went around to thousands of people, over 5,000 people. They did what they knew how to do, trusting that Jesus would do a miracle. Something that only he could do. Here are 3 cool things for you and I to take away from this message. Number 1, we can do the same thing that the disciples did in this story 2,000 years ago. When we feel that internal nudge from God, we can put our excuses aside and act on it. We can move. We can choose to do that. Secondly, it's not as daunting and intimidating as it feels. The disciples did what they could based on what they knew. It wasn't like they had to memorize a bunch of theology books or learn every worship song or go to preaching school. They just did what they could. And then thirdly, it's a huge faith builder to serve others. Part of having a grown-up faith of your own is being stretched and challenged to go outside of your comfort zone. In these moments, the fear and anxiety you feel can actually push you to trust God more. It can make your faith bigger and stronger and more mature. Guys, here's the thing. The future of your faith is at stake. Let me say that again. Eyes up here. Guys, the future of your faith is at stake. I'm not being overly dramatic. I really mean that. We talked last week about the statistic of 1 out of 2 high schoolers, when they graduate from their youth ministry, walk away from their faith. Your faith is at stake. It sounds dramatic, but it's true. There's a place your faith will only go once you decide to step out of your comfort zone. Where's that direction? It's going to go up. It's going to increase your faith and strengthen your faith in Jesus. And it's not even, as we said before, as much about the need you're meeting. It's not really about the people you're serving. It's about what God's going to do in your heart when you're serving them. It's about the trust and confidence you're putting in God in the process. You grow because you're stepping out in a way that you never have before. The story in Matthew continues. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, besides women and children. So that means there could have been as many as 10,000 people here. The disciples walked away, not in awe of themselves, but giving credit to God for showing up and doing what only He could do. Jesus had a very specific agenda in doing this miracle. There's a specific reason that it happened at this exact time, as we'll find out in a minute. See, Jesus was looking at more than just a crowd of hungry people. It was really about Jesus' disciples. Jesus didn't want them to just do what He said. No, He wanted to stretch their faith when it came to handing out the fish and bread so that they would trust Him when it came to bigger things. See, that was lesson 101. And that lesson 101 was preparing them for what came next, lesson 201. In fact, the story doesn't end there. It overflows into what happens next. It's the same story that Brian, our speaker at Winter Retreat, talked about. So if you were there, you're going to recognize this one when he talked about it last weekend. Check it out. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of Him to the other side while He dismissed the crowd. After He had dismissed them, He went up on a mountainside by Himself to pray. Later that night, He was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Pause there. Now the disciples have been rowing in the storm all night. Shortly before dawn, Jesus walked on the lake up to the boat. Okay, this isn't just like a calm sea, this is rough seas, choppy water, in the dark, in the middle of the night. Now, if you've grown up in church, you've heard this story 100 times, it might just, Pastor goes, guys, think about this. That was the first time in human history that a person walked on water. Mind blown when you actually stop to think of what that would have looked like to see that happen. Probably a little freaky in the middle of a storm to see that happen. Let's check out what happens next. When the disciples saw Him walking the lake, they were terrified. Yeah, like I said, it'd be a little freaky. That's understandable. It's a ghost, they said, and they cried out in fear. Again, understandable. But Jesus immediately said to them, hey, take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid. And this is the moment when Peter, see, today's message is really about Peter. When Peter realized the disciples can do anything that Jesus asks of them. His faith has grown tremendously since before the feeding of the 5,000. Something happened in Peter's heart when he watched Jesus use the disciples to feed the 5,000. Peter figured out that all they have to do, it's the next one, all they have to do is bring what they have to the table and trust Jesus with the rest. In fact, Peter puts his faith, his deeper faith, his newfound strong faith in Jesus, he puts it immediately into practice right here. He shouted out, Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, Jesus said. Next, then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. Again, if you grew up in church, don't fast forward to this. Guess what just happened? Peter became only the second human in history to walk on water. This is crazy. Can you imagine seeing that? Not just one guy walking, now there's two guys walking on this rough sea. There's choppy waves everywhere. It's dark, it's scary, lightning. And They were walking on water. What? Here's why this matters. This is the same thing Peter does when he hands out the bread and fish in the preceding story. Remember, that was lesson 101. Now, Peter doesn't know how to prepare food for 5,000 people, but he does know how to serve others with what he has in his hands. And Peter knows how to get out of boats and how to walk on land. He knows how to walk on land because, he's only the second human to ever walk on water. But because he had trusted Jesus with something that made sense, in lesson 101, with the fish and the loaves of bread, because he obeyed Jesus there, what happened? Well, Peter was able then to trust Jesus with something that was much bigger and seemingly impossible. First two humans in history to walk on water. So here's the question for you guys today. Here's your next step. All eyes up here. I want you guys to think of this as your next step, how to apply this message to your life today in 2019 Dallas. Where is God nudging you to serve? Think about that. Don't say it out loud. Think in your head. Where is God nudging you? Truth is, we all have plenty of excuses for why we don't do what we feel nudged to do. But there's more at stake here than just an opportunity to serve. Because the real issue is your own faith. God wants to do something inside of you. God wants to amplify something in your relationship with you. He wants to take your faith to the next level. You have a role to play. Think of it this way. That's our bottom line tonight. There's a direct connection between growing and serving. They're connected. Just bring to Jesus what you have. Even if you don't have enough to feed 5,000. Get out of the boat. Even if you don't know how to walk on water. Pastor Matt, what does that mean? I'll break it down for you guys, make it easier. There are tons of ways that you guys can be involved in serving others right here at our church. You could serve in FiveStone Kids a couple times a month on a Sunday. You'll be rock stars to those guys. You could also serve here at FiveStone Students on Wednesday nights on our various serve teams. We've got a prayer team, tech team, worship team, cafe team. Talk to me after the service if that kind of interests you. Like, yeah, I can see myself doing that. I'm ready to take that next step in my faith. For some of you, though, church will just be a starting place on your journey to serve others the rest of your life. You'll find areas in your school, our community, and even around the world to get involved. You'll find ways to do that. Maybe just talking about it makes you nervous because every possibility for serving is outside of your comfort zone. It's probably a few of you right here. Just talking about serving others makes you nervous. Just the topic makes you nervous. It's okay. Push through it. Try it. Give it your best shot and see what happens. And guess what? Eyes up here. If you try it and push through your fears and excuses, it'll be worth it. Trust me, you won't regret it. So something you have control over as a teenager. You guys might think, as a teenager, I don't have any control of stuff. Well, guess what, guys? You have control of your own life on here, and you have the ability to decide, do I want to grow my faith by serving others? And it's something God can use to help you develop a faith that you'll call mine. In closing, I dare you to follow Peter's lead and ask God to invite you out there. Something like, you can just pray something simple like this: God, please take me out of my comfort zone. I'll do what I can do, and I'll trust you for what only you can do with the rest. It can be a simple prayer just like that. Because remember, there's a direct connection between growing and serving. So start serving. Don't wait. Start this week. I'm going to invite our leaders to come to the front. I'll be closing prayer. Go ahead and bow your heads, close your eyes. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this night. Thank you for these students here. Thank you for the work that you did and the students who attended Winter Retreat 19. Lord, I pray that it would continue into tonight, that they would remember what they heard tonight, and that it just wouldn't go in one ear and out the other, but that these students would start to realize the truth that serving is connected with growing in their faith. And that it's not really about serving other people and what I can do for them, but it's really about what you can do through us when we open our hearts to serve others, to be used as your hands and feet. And Lord, I pray that you'd help any of the students that are nervous about that or have fears or excuses to go, not me, I can't do that. I pray that you would just give them courage and strength to push through that, just to try it out, to see what serving can do to their faith, that it can be a rocket boost in growth and take them to the next level in their relationship with you. I pray your blessed protection over everyone gathered in this room in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, we're going to dismiss to D groups. Middle school girls are going to be with Avery and Lorena. Middle school guys are going to either be with Ben or myself. High school girls are going to be with Donna. Where's Donna? Where's Donna? Where is she? She's in the back. And high school guys are going to be with Heath. All right, you guys dismiss to D groups.
This is impressive. Turn off.